Almost half your life, your mind isn't where you are. Researchers at Harvard surveyed more than 2,000 people, pinging them at random to ask, "What are you doing right now? And what are you thinking about?" The finding was unsettling. Nearly 47% of our waking hours, we're thinking about something other than what we're actually doing, and the more the mind wanders, the unhappier we are. Which means that even when you've done nothing wrong, you've already lost the most important match of your life, the one against your own mind. Let me be honest with you. In the past week, how many times did you sit down to do something you knew was good for you, and something inside just said, no? The tiredness out of nowhere, the fear you couldn't name, that voice whispering, "Start tomorrow." Why bother? It won't work anyway. You've told yourself the problem is willpower, but that's not it. You're being ruled by a mind that's out of control, one that digs up the past at 2 in the morning, projects disaster onto a future that hasn't happened, and keeps up a running commentary of judgment that never stops. A chaotic mind isn't the result of a hard life. Often, it's the cause. And here's the cruelest part. The harder you try to not think about something, the harder it fights back. Try it. For 10 seconds, do not think about a white bear. You know what just happened. Psychologists call it the rebound effect, and it reveals something devastating. The strategy you've used your whole life, controlling your mind by fighting your own thoughts, is the very thing making everything worse. You're not losing because you're weak. You were handed the wrong instructions. Here's the hard truth, almost no one says out loud. You can't control your mind, not by force, not by willpower, not by beating it into silence. And the reason you keep losing is that you've spent your whole life trying to. The way out was never more control. It's the exact opposite. Maybe it's not an accident you're watching this. The Japanese mapped the way out more than 1,000 years ago, long before neuroscience confirmed it. And that's exactly what an old kyudo master named Nakamura taught a man named Kenji, an ordinary man you'd walk right past on the street, never guessing he'd been losing a war with his own mind for almost 40 years. Stay to the end, and you won't just understand why your head is so loud, you'll walk away with something small, concrete, and free you can start tomorrow morning. Before we begin, but first, do me one favor. Write down in the comments, name one thought that keeps coming back to haunt you when you least want it to. Don't explain it. Don't justify it. Just name it. Your answer might help someone else wrestling with the very same thought realize they're not alone. And if this is the kind of content you've been looking for, where 1,000-year-old Japanese philosophy meets the modern science of the mind, take 1 second to subscribe and hit like. All right, let's get into it. Chapter 1. The Man Who Was Losing to Himself. Kenji wasn't the kind of man you'd look at and think, that guy is suffering. He was 38, a team lead at a company in Tokyo. He paid his bills on time, answered his messages, caused no trouble the world could see. His problem was on the inside, where no one could reach. Kenji's mind was like a television nobody ever turned off. The moment his head hit the pillow, the channel flipped on. His boss's cutting remark, the email he hadn't answered, a conversation from 3 years ago he'd handled wrong, resurrected in perfect detail. He'd wake up already exhausted, not the honest tiredness of a body that worked hard, but the grey fatigue of a mind that had never once been allowed to rest. Maybe you know that exact kind of tired. The kind sleep doesn't fix. Kenji had tried everything. Meditation quit after 2 days because he couldn't stop thinking. A mindfulness app opened 4 times, deleted. Self-help books, abandoned past chapter 3. Because by chapter 3 his mind had already wandered off. The problem underneath was a belief he'd never questioned, that controlling his mind meant forcing it silent. So every time his head roared, he took it as proof he was broken. This is just who I am. Some people are calm. I'm not. Nothing's going to change that. This went on for almost 40 years until one grey Thursday, walking home by a route he never took, he passed a small dojo. A faded wooden sign, "Kyudo, the way of the bow and arrow. Beginners welcome." Kenji wasn't looking for archery. He was looking for anything, any door out of the room he'd been trapped in for decades. Inside, a man of maybe 70 was drawing a longbow, small and grey-haired, moving at a completely different speed than the world. What held Kenji wasn't the arrow, it was the stillness, a quality of attention he'd never seen in another human being. The man was entirely present in every movement, and Kenji, who had never been fully present anywhere, felt something in his chest ache. The man loosed the arrow, lowered it, and turned. "Do you want to come in, or stand out there and watch?" His voice was calm, without a trace of judgment. "I don't know if this is right for me. I'm 38. I've never done anything like this." The old man smiled faintly. "Then you're exactly where you need to be." That evening, Kenji met Master Nakamura. Chapter 2. The First Lesson, Mushin. On the first day, Kenji wasn't allowed to touch an arrow. Nakamura simply taught him a way to stand feet planted, spine long, and had him hold it for 45 minutes. That was the entire lesson. It was maddening. His mind started its familiar performance. Am I doing this right? Are the others watching me? This is ridiculous. At the end, certain he'd failed, he approached the master. "Sensei, my mind wouldn't stop drifting." "Is that normal?" "Not only is it normal, it was the most important thing that happened today. You noticed your mind wander, and you brought it back. You noticed, and you returned. That is the entire practice. The stance is only an excuse to give you something to return to. The real training is noticing the moment the mind leaves, and gently bringing it home. It has an old name, Mushin, no mind. It does not mean an empty head. It means a mind that no longer clings to its thoughts, that lets them arrive, and lets them pass through, like weather." Kenji walked home with the feeling of finally being handed a word for something he'd felt his whole life. Notice and return. Could it be he'd had it backwards, that controlling the mind was never about silencing it, only noticing it, again and again, with patience instead of contempt? He came back the next week, and the week after. Somewhere around the 30th repetition of a movement, he saw his mind had two options: resist the boredom, or simply be there inside the motion. And on the days he stayed, the intrusive thoughts still came, but they arrived with less weight. They drifted through instead of grabbing hold. The dojo wasn't about learning to shoot a bow. It was a laboratory for the one skill he'd never been taught: how to live inside his own mind without being tortured by it. Chapter 3. The Monkey in Your Head, Saru no Kokoro. 3 months in, Kenji arrived with his head louder than usual. He'd just had a blistering argument with his boss. The session was a disaster. His body was in the dojo, but the rest of him was still in that office, rehearsing the comeback he'd never deliver. At the end, Nakamura sat beside him. "That thing at work, is it still happening right now?" "No, it's over. The meeting was this morning." "Then why is it still here, on this floor, with us?" "Your mind picked it up, carried it across the city, and set it down in the middle of your practice. The Japanese call a mind that cannot stay where the body is Saru no Kokoro, the monkey mind." He mimed a monkey leaping branch to branch. "It swings from the past to the future, from regret to worry to fantasy, never in the one place that's real, here, now, where the body stands." Kenji recognized it with painful precision. He wasn't a man who occasionally got distracted. He was a man dragged through his own life by a frantic monkey. Then how do I stop it? You don't. Fight the monkey and it only gets wilder. Now there are two monkeys, and you're using the mind to control the mind. It's like fighting fire with fire. Then what works? You give the monkey something to hold. Something concrete, here in the present. The breath, the soles of your feet, the tension of the string on your fingertips. These are anchors. The monkey grabs the anchor, and for one moment, it stops leaping. Maybe you're recognizing your own mind in this. A busy head isn't a personal defect, it's the most human thing in the world. But if you're recognizing yourself, listen closely to what's next, because it's the most practical part of this whole video, the part that answers the question almost no video answers. Okay. But what, specifically, do I do? Chapter 4. The practice. Give the monkey an anchor. The next morning at the kitchen sink, Kenji tried something so small it felt silly. Instead of replaying the argument while he washed the dishes, he put his full attention on 3 things: the temperature of the water on his hands, the weight of each plate, the sound of the water in the sink. No app, no cushion, just dishes. His mind wandered within 4 seconds. But this time he didn't scold himself. He just noticed, I drifted again, and brought his attention gently back. He did it maybe 30 times over one sink of dishes. And here's the reframe that changed everything. Those 30 wanderings weren't 30 failures. Each noticing and returning was 1 rep. The wandering wasn't the enemy of the practice. It was what made the practice possible. Let me say this plainly, because people get it wrong. Being present while you wash the dishes does not mean narrating in your head, "Now I'm holding the plate." That narration is still thinking. Real presence is dropping beneath the words, feeling the heat, the weight, the sound, with no commentary. The anchor isn't a sentence in your mind, it's a sensation in your body. And that's why the body matters. The monkey lives in the past and future, but your body can only exist in the present. Coming back to the body is coming back to now. Kenji made a short list of anchors, and I'd encourage you to make your own. 1. The breath, not controlling it, just feeling one inhale and one exhale. 2. The soles of your feet on the floor while you wait for the elevator. 3. An object in your hand, the morning cup of coffee, its warmth against your palms for 3 seconds before the first sip. 4. A background sound you normally filter out the hum of the fridge, distant traffic. 4 anchors, all free, all available every day. But here's the instruction that separates people who change from people who collect techniques and use none. Don't try to do all 4 at once. Nakamura's rule was simpler. 1 breath, 1 time. Choose 1 moment that already repeats every day and make it the place where you practice. For Kenji, it was his morning coffee. Every morning, 3 seconds, the warmth of the cup, tedious and profound at once, like water wearing a groove into stone. After a few weeks, he noticed the noticing muscle getting stronger. He caught his mind mid-drift sooner, not 10 minutes later, lost in a spiral. 10 seconds later, and the sooner you notice, the shorter the trip back. Chapter 5. The Cloud and the Sky Fudoshin. 2 months later, Kenji found Nakamura shooting alone. The movements flowed without hesitation, but what struck Kenji was the absence of expression, a deep steadiness, as if nothing could knock this man off the ground he stood on. How can you be like that? Nothing rattles you. Everything rattles me. I feel all of it. I simply don't identify with the disturbance. Fudoshin, the immovable mind. When you get angry, what happens? I say things I shouldn't, then think about them for hours. Because you identify with the anger. You are not having anger, you have become the anger. And when you are the anger, it makes your decisions for you. Fudoshin isn't suppressing anger. Pushing it down only feeds it. It's observing anger the way you'd watch a cloud drift across the sky. The cloud is real, but you are not the cloud. You are the sky, and the sky doesn't change when a cloud passes through. Like Kenji, you are not your current emotion. However heavy this moment feels, it's a cloud, not the sky. The next week, a co-worker sent an email criticizing Kenji's work and copied the whole team. He felt the heat climb his neck, the furious reply already forming, his fingers on the keyboard. And then he stopped. Not because he was enlightened, but because something he'd practiced for months finally showed up on its own. He noticed the warmth in his chest, the tightness in his shoulders, and instead of firing back, he watched it. The cloud was there, but he was not the cloud. He closed the laptop, poured a glass of water, came back 15 minutes later, and wrote 3 calm sentences that solved the problem without starting a new one. For the first time in nearly 40 years, he hadn't reacted. He had chosen. That gap between reacting and choosing is the difference between a mind that rules you and a mind that serves you. Chapter 6. The Night Kenji Almost Quit Jiko Seigyo. Every real journey has a dark night. Kenji's came that winter, in the crush of an end-of-year deadline. He got home late and collapsed into a chair without taking off his coat, his mind everywhere at once. He typed a message to Nakamura. He was going to take a break, just until things calmed down. He finished it, looked it over and didn't send it, because in the silence before his thumb hit send, a thought arrived almost against his will. When things settle down, I'll just find another reason. This isn't a break. This is me quitting the same way I've quit everything my whole life. He locked the phone. The screen went dark. The next morning, on almost no sleep, he still went. Last night I almost didn't come. I nearly quit. Nakamura nodded. Every student has that night. Last night, some part of you chose not to send it. Do you know where that part came from? I recognized the pattern. I saw myself doing the thing I always do right as I was doing it. That has a name too. Jiko Seigyo, self-mastery. It is not gritting your teeth and suppressing the impulse. It is observing the impulse clearly enough, early enough, that a choice becomes possible. You didn't fight yourself. You watched yourself. And in the watching, You were free to choose differently. And I know that right about now part of you might be thinking, this sounds nice, but I've watched 100 videos like this and nothing ever changes. I understand that, and you're right to be skeptical. Let me say it plainly. Watching this video will not change your life. There's no magic pill, no 3-minute trick. The only thing that has ever worked is the unglamorous thing Kenji was doing, showing up every day, practicing one anchor, noticing and returning, especially on the days it feels pointless. The difference between people who transform and people who stay stuck isn't talent or luck. It's whether they'll keep doing the small, boring, repetitive thing after the motivation is gone. Simple, not easy. Chapter 7. The space between stimulus and response. Ma. Now we arrive at the heart of it. If you take only one thing from this entire video, let it be this. By now, Nakamura and Kenji had a ritual. After the others left, they'd drink tea in the small room behind the dojo, where the deepest conversations happened. One evening, Nakamura asked, "What do you think is the opposite of self-mastery? Impulsiveness? Lack of discipline?" He shook his head. Reactivity. A life lived in constant reaction. The environment says something, you react. The mind offers a thought, you obey it. The phone buzzes. Your hand moves before you've decided anything. A person who lives entirely in reaction doesn't really have a life. They have a chain of reactions, one triggering the next. Kenji was quiet a long moment. That's my whole life. And the life of most people. Not because they're weak, because no one ever told them there was another way. And what is the other way? The space. Between the stimulus and your response, there is a space. Small, easy to miss, but always there. And inside it is your freedom, your power to choose who you'll be. The Japanese have a word for that meaningful emptiness. Ma. In music, ma is the silence between the notes that makes them music instead of noise. In kyudo, the most important moment isn't when the arrow flies, it's the stillness just before you release the string. Training the mind is learning to find that space and patiently widening it until the automatic reaction is no longer your only option. Kenji's whole life he'd lived as though stimulus and response were welded together, as though the instant someone insulted him, his anger was simply required. But there was a gap. There had always been a gap, and a gap can be widened. So let me speak directly to you, because this is the part easiest to say and hardest to do. The next time something makes you want to react instantly, a text that makes your blood boil, a comment that makes you shrink, the urge to grab your phone the moment you feel anxious, try one thing. Don't try to control the reaction, just insert one breath. 1. Before you say anything, type anything, do anything, one slow breath. If you can, do it with me right now, all the way in, all the way out. That breath is the space. That breath is Ma, and inside it, you remember you have a choice. You won't always choose well. But remembering, in the heat of the moment, that a choice exists is the entire difference between a life that's controlled and a life that's lived. Kenji began hunting for the space everywhere, stuck in traffic, impatience rising one breath, space. His hand drifting to his phone out of habit, he'd catch it, breathe, and ask, "Do I actually want this, or am I just reacting?" Often he reacted before he caught it, but every time he noticed, even late, that was one more rep, one more widening of the gap. Nakamura once said something Kenji wrote in a notebook. An untrained mind is an instrument that only plays music written by other people. A trained mind is an instrument you learn to play yourself. Chapter 8. When the arrow releases itself, Mushin and the science. For months, everything Kenji had learned, the anchor, the space, the cloud and the sky, had been something he reached for on purpose. Then came the morning. It all happened on its own. One Saturday morning in March, Nakamura guided Kenji through a drill under time pressure. His mind did what it always did. I'm going to blow this. I'm going to look like a fool. Then the drill began, and something happened he could never explain. His mind stopped commenting, not silent, but the voice that usually graded his every move simply wasn't there. He drew, aimed, adjusted, released with no inner critic narrating. There was only the movement, the space, the next moment. You felt it, Nakamura said. That was Mushin. The mind is fully working, but it isn't judging. And it happened the moment you stopped trying to force it. You were never going to win this by gripping tighter. You can't control the mind by force, you can only stop fighting it long enough to let it settle. The secret was always knowing when to let go. What Kenji experienced wasn't mystical, and later, when he went looking for why, he found that science had been circling the same truth for decades. The neuroscientist Antonio Damasio found that emotion doesn't get in the way of reason it's required for it. Patients who lost the ability to feel emotion became unable to make even trivial decisions, like what to eat for lunch. The psychologist Roy Baumeister described ego depletion. Willpower behaves like a muscle that burns out fastest when you spend it. Suppressing your own thoughts while calmly observing them costs a fraction of the energy. And Richard Davidson's team at the University of Wisconsin measured structural changes in the prefrontal cortex of long-term meditators. For Kenji, reading this landed less like a discovery than a permission slip. For almost 40 years, he'd assumed he was simply built wrong. He wasn't. His mind had never been broken, only untrained. So, carry that with you, especially if you've ever thought I was just born this way. Your brain is not fixed. It grows with training, the way a body does. What the Japanese called Mushin, science calls the flow state. What they called ma, psychologists call the pause between stimulus and response. Same thing. Two languages, 1,000 years apart. Chapter 9. The Turning Point. 10 months after he first stood frozen in that doorway, Kenji tested for his first rank. The rank barely mattered. What mattered was what it represented. Proof he hadn't quit the night he almost sent that message. Proof he'd come back after every humiliating session. When his turn came, he felt the nerves rise and he breathed and noticed them. The cloud was there, but it wasn't him. He made mistakes, but he didn't freeze or spiral. He noticed and kept going. That was the whole victory. Not perfection, continuation. The next week, over tea, Kenji tried to name what had actually changed, and it had almost nothing to do with archery. It's the space. I pause before I react now. Not always, but so much more. And when I pause, the decision I make is almost always better. And my head isn't as drained as it used to be. For years I'd come home wiped out even on days I did nothing hard. Now I understand I was spending all my energy fighting my own thoughts. Nakamura pressed his palms together. A mind at war with itself is the most exhausted mind on earth. Not tired from living, tired from the war inside. Then why does almost no one teach this? Some do. But it's a hard thing to teach. It can't be rushed, and it asks people to keep showing up on the days they least want to. Most give up long before it ever becomes theirs, and that reclaimed energy went somewhere. Within the year, Kenji got his first promotion in 7 years, not from longer hours, but from clearer decisions. And a co-worker he'd had cold tension with for years stopped by his desk. I don't know what changed, but you're a lot easier to be around now. When you stop being the source of the reaction, the world around you slowly rearranges itself in response. There was one more change, and it was the one Kenji had never dared to hope for. For years, evenings at home had been a kind of quiet absence, his body on the couch, his mind still back at the office, replaying, rehearsing, bracing for tomorrow. His wife had long since stopped expecting him to really be there. But one ordinary night, doing nothing special, he noticed he was actually listening to her, not waiting for his turn to speak, not half-drafting an email behind his eyes. Just there. She noticed it too. She didn't say anything grand. She just looked at him a beat longer than usual, and something in the room softened. Presence, Kenji realized, isn't only a private discipline you practice alone at a kitchen sink. It's the most generous thing you can offer another person, your undivided attention, with nothing held back and nowhere else you'd rather be. He began to see how far the ripples went. The son who used to get clipped, distracted answers now got a father who crouched down to his level and looked him in the eye. The friend who called on a Sunday was no longer talking to a man secretly checking the clock. None of it was dramatic. No one threw a party. But the texture of his days had changed at the root, because the man living them had finally arrived inside them. And that, Nakamura had told him once, is the quiet secret nobody advertises. You don't train your mind to win at work or to look calm in a crisis. You train it so that you can be fully present for the handful of ordinary moments that, added together, turn out to have been your entire life. Chapter 10. What Nakamura never told anyone. It was the last tea of a turbulent year. Sensei, have you always been like this? This calm? Did you always have it? Nakamura was silent a long time. Then, no. And for the first time, he told his own story. He'd left his hometown at 28, not for adventure, but in flight from a business that had collapsed and a marriage that had fallen apart in the wreckage. My mind in those years was the loudest and cruelest place you can imagine. I didn't come to the dojo seeking philosophy. I came because I was desperate, and it was the only door open to me. My first teacher told me something I've passed to every student since. A mind out of control is not your enemy. It is a child who was never taught how to behave. You don't scream at the child. You teach it patiently the same lesson every day. It took me 15 years to truly understand that. You're only at the beginning. But don't mistake the beginning for a small thing. He set the cup down. What you've done this year, showing up when you didn't want to, coming back after the hardest nights, watching your own mind without hating it, that's the beginning of the only path that has ever actually worked, for anyone, in 1,000 years. For almost 40 years, Kenji's strategy had been avoidance, fleeing the discomfort inside, into screens, into overwork, into noise. Now he stayed. And what he found on the other side of the resistance wasn't the monster his mind had promised, it was just stillness. And within the stillness, clarity, and within the clarity for the first time in his life, a choice. The 5 things Nakamura left behind. If you forget everything else, hold on to these 5. The first. A mind out of control is not a character flaw or a life sentence. It's a mind that was never trained. Not weakness, a lack of practice. And anyone can start. The second, the path is not to fight the mind, but to observe it and give it an anchor in the present, the breath, the weight in your hand, a sound. Notice when you drift and return, over and over, without self-judgment. That gentle repetition is what rewires the brain. The third, Fudoshin doesn't belong to people who feel nothing. It belongs to people who feel everything and don't dissolve into it. The cloud passes. The sky remains. You are the sky. The fourth, and if you keep only one, keep this. Between stimulus and response there is a space. In it lives your freedom. It begins with something so small you can do it in the next 5 minutes. One breath before you react. The fifth, a mind at war with itself is the most exhausted mind on earth. The day you stop fighting your own thoughts, you reclaim the energy that inner conflict was quietly devouring, and that changes everything. Kenji didn't become a different person. He became, at last, himself, with no more noise standing between him and who he'd always been. Now it's your turn. So what about you? How many years have you spent living in reaction? How many mornings have started heavy because your mind never truly rested? You don't have to change your whole life in one night. Here's my invitation. So small you can't make an excuse. Tomorrow, choose one moment that already repeats your first coffee, the wait for the elevator, the first breath as you sit at your desk, and make it your anchor. 3 seconds of real presence. When your mind drifts, don't get angry. Just notice and bring it home. 1 moment, every day. That's the beginning. The monkey in your head won't stop leaping because you want it to. It stops when you give it a branch to land on, and when you stop exhausting yourself chasing it. So no, you can't control your mind. You were never meant to. That's exactly why fighting it has cost you so much, for so long. But the day you stop trying to control it and start learning to work with it, you stop losing. That's the whole secret Nakamura gave Kenji, and it's the one I'm handing to you now. Closing, at the end of every session, Nakamura said the same words to Kenji. The mind you have today is not the mind you'll have tomorrow, as long as you keep showing up. Show up. If this video reached something in you, maybe that isn't an accident either. Before you go, subscribe if you haven't yet, and tell me in the comments of the ideas Nakamura taught Kenji, Mushin, Fudoshin, Jiko, Seigyo, and the space between stimulus and response. Which one hit you the hardest? Which do you most need to practice? Writing that single line is a tiny act, but as Nakamura would say, every real transformation began with exactly that. One small gesture, repeated faithfully. Thank you for giving your attention and your time to this. I'll see you in the next one. And until then, remember, be present, walk with honor, and go all the way.